So welcome to our program, and today we are very welcome to see in our project Matti Maasikas. It's the European Union ambassador and head of the EU delegation to Ukraine. Welcome to our program.
Thank you very much.
And thanks beforehand for your time.
Thank you.
So we have a lot of questions towards the situation with the disinformation that uses Russia during all these months, not only in Ukraine, not only in Russia, but around the world. So I will try to find as more as possible what's going on with this disinformational fight in Europe, in Ukraine, and what we can do together. So my first question will be just according to what Russia says. So they very often say that the level of support of Ukraine much lower than it was in the beginning of the war after 24th of February. So it's great time for you to say, is this level the same or maybe much higher?
This claim is, of course, completely untrue. And throughout this, at the time of the full-scale invasion, the European citizens are supporting Ukraine in a very steady manner. According to the latest data from April, 76% of EU citizens supporting Ukraine, support what the EU is doing to help Ukraine and Ukrainians. So the support that Ukraine gets from the EU governments is a very solid democratic support by the citizens, and I'm very proud of that. There are different tracks and elements. The hospitality towards the Ukrainian refugees is the same. It has not decreased. On humanitarian, on all the types of support that the EU gives, there is a solid democratic support by the citizens.
And can you say, do we have some strong, or maybe you see we have some weak sides in our relations between Ukraine and European Union during this year? So what's better to be improved and that we might improve right now?
I mean, if we are talking about overall our relationship, it has only strengthened and deepened throughout the time of the full-scale invasion. Most notably on the political track, where the European Union promised membership to Ukraine, gave the candidate status. Of course, in order to proceed on that track, now there is awful lot has been done by the Ukrainian authorities, and I'm very proud of that. And it's one of the many miracles of Ukraine that even during a whole-scale war, the Ukrainian government is working, Ukrainian institutions are working, Ukrainian democracy is working, parliament is meeting, adopting laws, the government is implementing them. In order for the European Commission to propose new steps, next steps on our relationship, or Ukraine's track towards the EU, again, awful lot has been done. There is good progress. Some things still need to be done. I'm, for instance, hopeful for the Verkhovna Rada session in the coming days. The Constitutional Court judges selection law needs to be amended. The electronic asset declarations need to be restored. The definition of the politically exposed persons in the context of fighting money laundering needs to be amended. So there are still things to do, but progress has been good.
On our way to the integration to the European Union, we understand that we had to make a lot of reforms, and now I hear from you that we are good with this. But sometimes some politicians might say that this or that kind of reform we cannot implement right now because of the war. So what reforms are able to do right now, and what reforms we can do even having war on our lands, but with the help of European Union. For example, maybe in the economical field, or maybe some decisions were already made by European parliaments that would help us to implement these reforms. What is this?
There are, of course, things that cannot be done when the war is ongoing, or until the war is ongoing, before Ukraine's victory, like big changes in the energy system, in the broader sense of the word, and alike. But as we discussed earlier, if the Ukrainian state is functioning, so is the Ukrainian society. Daily life goes on, and daily life needs to be assisted, helped, and protected by the authorities. And you know very well that, for instance, the Ukrainian society is very adamant, insisting on the government to better fight corruption. Mm-hmm. And this is ongoing. And the Ukrainian authorities know that, acknowledge that, and the latest nominations of the heads of the anti-corruption agencies is a very good step, and you see the results of this work, like the otherwise very unfortunate Supreme Court President Knyazev's case. Justice reform is ongoing. Recently, the High Council of Justice appointed the High Qualification Commission of Judges. Now, the 2,500 vacant judges posts can be, or the work can start in order to fill them. And this is not because the EU asks you so, but this is because your own citizens want it, yeah. And it forms a part of the popular support to the war effort. People need to see, and people are seeing now, that the Ukrainian state is actually quite capable. Before February last year, it was not always the case. The trust towards your own institutions was not that high. Now people trust the institutions more, but that also means they demand more, they ask for more.
This is absolutely, I agree with you. The European people and the European politicians, Ukrainians, see what's changing in these positions too. But this is one more painful question that uses Russian propagandists and fake news and manipulate the information, manipulate the facts, and saying that the Ukrainian state exists only because of the help of our international allies. And the war escalates only because our allies help us with the weapons and help us to stay strong on the battlefield. So what can you say to those who listen to these propagandists and believe in this kind of information?
At the very heart of the Ukrainian war effort stands the Ukrainian people's spirit, the Ukrainian people's determination to fight back. That's where it all starts. Your allies could send you world's best weaponry and hundreds of billions of dollars, although we are counting dozens of billions already. But without the fighting spirit, without well-organized and well-led military, without good cooperation between the civilian and military leadership, this all would not be possible.
One more disinformational point that uses Russians in their informational wars around Europe, they're saying about ineffectiveness of the sanctions, and they are continuing to say they have good connections and diplomatic connections to different countries, so they're free to be presented in the UN nation and Security Council of United Nations and so on. So the economists and the experts in this field say just in the contrary. So how can you explain what's going on with the Russian economy? And will the 11th package of sanction will complete all the 10th that were implemented before, because this will help to stop third countries from avoiding these sanctions. How effective will the 11th will be, and what is really with the economy of Russian Federation, you see?
Indeed, at the beginning The first package is targeted directly Russia to make it impossible to finance this war effort, to make it impossible to produce or reproduce military, but also other equipment like planes, like cars. And of course to cripple Russia's state revenues. And if you look there, before February last year, almost 40% of natural gas that was used in the EU came from Russia. Today it's around 5%. Russia's state revenues from oil and gas, which, as we know, form the main bulk of the state revenues, since they cannot sell much more things, has fallen by 46%. 46% they get less this year from oil and gas. At the same time, Russia's state expenditures have risen by 50%. The Ural crude oil, Russian crude oil, sells at $40 a barrel. Brent sells at $80 a barrel. So there you see, there are sanctions that never work overnight. That's also clear. Economy is pretty resilient. It takes time to affect economies, but they are having effect now. You rightly said that that now more and more your Western partners, including the EU, is paying attention to how to prevent also transit of the strategic goods, so that they don't go via, say, the countries in the Central Asian region or others to Russia.
The other myth that goes just after this one, that they don't care about the sanction, that the society of European countries suffer from the sanction itself, and Putin is just waiting when people, maybe he's waiting for the next winter, I don't know, because he tried to use this myth and all these manipulations during the winter, that Europeans are suffering from the high prices, from the low heating in the houses and so on. So what can you say about this situation? What's the main reason of recession not only in Europe, it's a global situation, but Russians still take just one part of this story and uses it as a disinformation for European people as well?
It is amazing to see how resilient has been the EU's economy. And the prime example here that concerns directly our topic is how quickly were the EU countries able to divert from using Russian gas to other sources of gas. So make no mistake, this export will not return. This situation will not return, even after Ukraine's victory. We have diversified our sources. We also have had a leap in using renewable sources for electricity. We have done our homework, and Russia has virtually no tools to affect EU economies.
But still, Russian very sneaky, even in this situation, in informational field. If they're weak on the battlefields, they try to show off their force in the informational field. So
it's a typical Russian thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
This belief that, oh, they will not survive without us. Oh, yes, we do.
So they think about themselves, that everybody is accepting the situation the same way. So I wanted to ask much globally about the cybersecurity, about the counter force with the disinformational sources. You said that you learned your lesson, you improved the situation. What about this field? What is the main painful areas in the European Union that mostly affected by Russian disinformation, and how you and your colleagues in other countries, and even with Ukraine together, we are fighting with this disinformation, how the situation in this field changed, and how can be useful to one another?
Here, the EU got a somewhat slow start. I remember very well, I represented Estonia in the EU at that time in Brussels. When in 2013, 2014, we were constantly, some member states were constantly raising the issue of Russian propaganda. Then some member states, especially in the western part of the EU, they did not feel that it affects them. They thought they are too far away, not that many connections. But then there were cases like the infamous Lisa case in Germany.
Yeah.
Or President Macron went public after his first election win in 2017 that we saw that Russia actually wanted to try to impact these elections. And then today, of course, there is absolutely no doubt, no disagreements. The Russian propaganda, Russian information war affects us all, or targets us all, and we need to fight that. In the European External Action Service, there is a dedicated center fighting Russian disinformation. There are alert mechanisms that are in force where the EU institutions and member states can feed in propaganda or when they see Russia's attempt, and it will be fought. And we are doing that, of course, well together with the Ukrainians. Ukraine has, I don't have to tell you, very, I don't want to say good, but very strong experiences in that field. It works well. We work well together. We support the State Strategic Information Center and of course 9 Russian channels and media outlets and dozens of propagandists have been put under EU sanctions. That's how we fight this disinformation. But it is a daily work. It is a daily job.
And if you allow me, my last question will be with the example of how top media, international media, and even news agencies like Bloomberg and Reuters about the tragedy that happened several days ago with this destroyment hydroelectric power plant in Ukraine, and they were given the chance to comment to the Russian side. And it was Peskov, and everybody knows that he's lying. Everything that Kremlin is saying, it's a lie. So from this point of view, how to deal with disinformation, like you said, globally, if even very honorable issues give a chance to lie again and said that nothing is so simple as we think, like Russians like to say, не все так однозначно. So what should we do in this field? Is it appropriate to give a word to them?
This horrible tragedy that followed, the explosion or the destruction of the Novakhovka dam, it is in fact a good example of that. Yes, there is this journalistic code or protocol that you need also to give the floor, to ask the chance to the opposite party. But you see, first of all, how several top politicians like Charles Michel, the president of the European Council, like Josep Borrell, the EU's High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy, quite early came out saying it can be only Russia. And then you see how the same outlets, I want to be fair, the same outlets who asked Peskov also are asking, and quickly, several different experts who say, by all logic, it can only be Russia. Of course, since this dam was under illegal Russian occupation, they bear responsibility anyway. But the Ukrainians would not have the means and nor the motivation to do that. And of course, we also both know who cares more of human life in this constellation. So I think I would argue that this was actually a good example how, of course, it is probably so that the Russians will not claim responsibility. They will not concede that they did it, but the evidence is so clear there.
Absolutely. It's the topic for another big discussion, especially when everything is changing in the world globally, and maybe it's the next topic to understand what is the journalistic ethic will be in the top in the nearest future. And is it appropriate in such situation to use the constructions of the past? So it's a different item. But thank you very much for your assistance, and thank you very much for your honest answers. Thank you.
I thank you.